Is Brock Lesnar versus Jon Jones a good idea? Knuckleheads, welcome to the Fighters Rep, where we give you free fights, interviews in the fight game, and fight commentary from the mind of a promoter. At first when I looked at this potential matchup, I said to myself, this is a gimmick. This is a fight that's being considered because it's a big money fight. Brock Lesnar is a big draw. He's a crossover star with WWE and the UFC. And Jon Jones obviously is a big name. Everybody's excited about him moving up from light heavyweight to heavyweight. And I just feel like it's a gimmick. I didn't think that Brock Lesnar was a good fight for Jon Jones going into heavyweight because honestly, as I said in my previous video, I think Jon Jones is going to clear out the heavyweight division if he's still got that fire in him. But that being said, I just felt like Brock Lesnar was a gimmicky fight. 43 years old, lost 2 out of his last 3 fights in the UFC, with the third one being overturned and turned into a no contest because he tested positive for clomiphene against Mark Hunt. But now that I've kind of soaked it in and let it marinate a bit, I've thought to myself, well, Jon Jones is a guy who has never fought in the heavyweight division. He's an awfully big light heavyweight. Let me tell you guys, I'm about 6'2". I weigh about 220 pounds, and I met Jon Jones in person, shook his hand, and I felt like he was significantly taller than me, and I'm not a little guy. So he's a big guy, but he's never quite fought at the heavyweight division. He's never had to deal with that heavyweight physique, that heavyweight pressure, and he's never had to lug around that sort of weight in a fight, although I don't think he'll have a tremendous amount of problems lugging around a few more pounds. I mean, I do see him moving up to heavyweight, but I don't see him gaining too much weight. If he gains anything, obviously it's going to be muscle mass, and who knows, perhaps he becomes more explosive and stronger at heavyweight. Who knows? But that being said, now that I've sort of thought about the fight, I actually don't think it's the worst fight. Now, let me explain. Brock Lesnar, despite, again, the fact that he lost 2 of his last 3 fights and the third one was overturned and turned into a no contest, he's got a very strong wrestling base. He's a very physically imposing guy, a very strong guy. He's an athletic guy, and he's also tall. He's a big, tall guy. And I feel like if you're the promoter and you've got a superstar like Jon Jones on your hands, who's decided to make the jump a different weight class, you don't want to throw him in there with the Wolves immediately. First off, I don't think it's a good idea from a business standpoint. But second off, I don't think that it's a good idea for the fighter. I think a fighter moving to a completely different weight class, especially from light heavyweight to the heavyweight division, needs to become acclimated. And I feel like the only way you can acclimate, it's not in sparring, it's not in training, it's in a fight, right? It's in that fight scenario. And so I feel like, even though I've said in the past that I do think Jon Jones is going to clean out the heavyweight division at some point, assuming he still has that fire in him, I feel like it's not the worst fight if they do match Jon Jones against Brock Lesnar, because he will at least introduce him to the physicality of the heavyweight division. I mean, I don't think it would be wise. What I'm saying is, I don't think it would be wise to throw him in there immediately with a guy like a Francis Ngannou or even a guy like a Stipe Miocic. Perhaps a Curtis Blades, a Derek Lewis, guys like that. Maybe that's the better alternative if it's not going to be Brock Lesnar. But, I could see an argument being made for Brock Lesnar being a decent fight for Jon Jones' debut at heavyweight. Even though, again, don't get me wrong, I don't think Brock Lesnar will win this fight at all. But it will give the UFC, who obviously matches these guys, a good barometer. It'll give them a barometer. It'll give them that litmus test that they're looking for to determine, is Jon Jones a guy who should be fighting at heavyweight. Now, of course, ultimately the decision is going to be up to Jon Jones whether he stays in that weight or not. But obviously, as the promoter, you want to make sure that you're making fights that make sense, fair fights, even fights. And I don't think that the Brock Lesnar fight is a horrible fight, despite the fact that he's 43. His record is what it is in his past few fights, and it feels very gimmicky. It feels very gimmicky. And I think part of the reason that it's feeling a little extra gimmicky for me is the fact that Brock Lesnar is now a free agent, but it looks like, from what I'm reading online, that the WWE is probably going to sign him back on. Maybe he's just putting it out there, and they're just putting this out there to bring some buzz to him, and to the WWE, and to the UFC and Jon Jones and everything else. But at the end of the day, he was a former UFC champion. He's nowhere near his prime, but he is a big, physically imposing guy. And it would definitely be a fight that I'd be interested to watch as a fan. Okay? Do I think that it would be a better matchup with a guy like maybe Curtis Blades or Derek Lewis? Probably. But is it the worst matchup that could be made? I don't think so. So, knuckleheads, tell me what you think about this fight. Is this a good fight to make? Is this too gimmicky? Do you think Jon Jones just runs through Brock Lesnar, or do you think a huge, imposing, physical specimen and athlete like Brock Lesnar kind of gives him some resistance? Let me know in the comments below. Hit the subscribe button, the bell notification icon next to it. Join Knucklehead Nation. And be sure to click the link below. Get your Fighters Rep gear, shirts, hoodies, tank tops, masks, whatever. Because if you don't have your Fighters Rep gear, then you don't know shit about fighting. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk soon.